Shalom, good afternoon from Jerusalem, Israel. This is Mr. Lowell Joseph Gallant, founder of the Root and Branch Association Limited, established in the United States of God of Israel, bless America, New York State, in 1981, now celebrating our 43rd year. Today is Monday, February 26, 2024 in the Gregorian calendar, and since it is still daylight, it is the 17th day of the first of the last 12 months of the Hebrew Israelite year 5784, known as Adar Aleph 12a, because it's a leap year. Welcome to episode 17 of our now bi-monthly Root and Branch Association Bible Codes Fellowship seminars. The chairman of the fellowship is Professor Eliyahu Rips of Jerusalem, Israel, and his lifelong student and disciple, Art can correct me if that's wrong, is an American computer scientist who came many years ago to Israel, Mr. Art Levitt of Jerusalem. All three of us live in Jerusalem. And just do the rainmaking bit for myself, but not a different way for Art and Professor Rips. Please support my work to build our Hebrew Bible-based broadcasting network from Jerusalem, Israel, to honor the Godland, Torah, and people of Israel and all humanity. And I thank the small and growing number of people are doing just that. And now, without further ado, let me hand over the mic to our chairman, Professor Rips, and our lecturer, Mr. Levitt, for another fascinating, illuminating, illustrated journey into the world of the Bible codes. Professor Rips and Art, it's all yours.
Thank you.
Good, okay.
Here we go. In the last few months, we have gained yet more clarity about the strongest and simplest codes, those about Mashiach and about Hashem's names. And we have also discovered new codes that reflect the times we live in. Thank you, Aryeh, for the chance to review all this, and thank you, Professor Rips, for your ongoing guidance and direction. We're going to show in detail why this code happens to be telling the truth. And we will start with a little bit of history. From the Middle Ages, this whole discipline has been known about, and the whole way of skipping letters was written about in the Middle Ages. Professor Rips applied statistical methods to it. In the 70s, he was inspired by Rabbi Weissmandel. From the 40s, of course, Rabbi Weissmandel did not have a computer that found amazing codes in any case. And in the last few decades, we've been publishing and finding more and more clear patterns, which we will show today. It's a structure of one code relating to another code. And we see it more and more all the time. The way codes work is that we count an equal number of letters in between each letter. So you can see the word food here is every 10 letters if you count them. Order is also every 10 letters. And roses is every 11 letters in the backwards direction. But it's not so easy to see like this. So what we do is remove the spaces between the words. And this is not our idea. This is from the Middle Ages. And of course, it's in Hebrew. It's the Torah text that we're really dealing with, but I'm just showing an example in English. So if you line it up every 10 letters, you can see the words going vertically and diagonally. And you can find other words that skip every other row. Here's a skip of 20. Here's a skip of -18, which wraps around. But in general, most of the time you'll see straight lines, and they look like magnets on a refrigerator. And in a normal book, you'll see the same words as you see in the Torah, pretty much. Any large text, you'll see these smaller words but they'll be scattered in a typical book. But in the Torah, they are typically clustered way beyond what we would expect. Or they are sometimes stacked as well in a long phrase. And actually, here's an interesting example I just happened to see from years ago, and I reformatted it. This long phrase echoes various paraphrases from Jeremiah chapter 23. Very similar words, very similar language, and we're studying this now on a larger scale because longer phrases are very strong and very interesting, but we want to pin it down to examples like this to see how widespread it really is over the whole Tanakh. Maybe look at a very large sample from Tanakh, but this one is extremely strong as it is. One of the strongest codes that I'll be showing today. And Hashem's words are like fire. And actually, in the introduction to Eitz Chaim by the Ramchal, I just learned that he compares the Torah to coal, which is burning, but it doesn't appear to be. But if you apply a little bit of energy to it, you'll see the sparks. So if you revisit these codes and you revisit just the plain Torah, many times it will begin to be a fire. I want to talk about some elements about future hints in the codes and how that relates to Iran and Gaza. We've seen true predictions in the past, sometimes. Here's one that Haman from the Purim story will die, and he will be hanged. And in the same pattern, Saddam Hussein will die, and he will be hanged. And since it follows the same pattern, we see that it's a strong code. And in addition, Eric Bloom from France found this years ago. Right after Saddam was hung, it actually says like his brother. And he found this code before his half-brother was hung. His half-brother was part of the government at the time. It actually says he will die like his brother in the whole pasuk there. So I've always wondered, is it okay to try to attempt these future predictions? And what I saw with this famous code that Leib Schwartzman found related to 9/11, it seems to be a prediction. And I thought, I'm not supposed to pursue that. And people would ask me, isn't this a prediction? He's cursed and he will, and revenge will come from Mashiach. So very recently, Moshe Beleish found in the same code using his software that it's actually labeled as a prediction and from the code, prediction from the code. Right inside the code itself. So it's interesting. Trying to piece it all together. But in general, we have to be very cautious with predictions. We've seen them correct. We've seen them not correct. For Iran, we use the same terminology as we were just looking at. Cursed is Iran. And the first few phrases in that long sentence was, I will give you the nickname, I will dub you, Khorma, which means destruction. And those words appear with Iran, just like they appeared with bin Laden. So that doesn't seem like great news for Iran. But again, we don't know what we can rely on other than Hashem. We don't know if these codes, we're not prophets, but we're getting some messages. For Gaza, Rabbi Ephraim Reutman found these phrases. Desolation. First of all, Gaza, you could read it two ways. You could read it Gaza destroyed or Gaza was destroyed, or both ways. And talks about desolation and death. And that phrase is repeated over on the other side of the code next to the world. And I don't know whether that means, spiritual desolation, some physical desolation. Darkness is there twice, going in both directions. But ultimately, we have right next to it the message, Mashiach, and mercy. So I think, as I said, the prophets are the ones to pay attention to, not the codes. Codes are interesting, but this code reminded me of Zephaniah, which I happened to be looking up for another reason, because of the word joy or rejoice that we'll see in a few minutes. Zephaniah uses that word for Jerusalem. Zephaniah has a whole mix of points. He's talking against complacency and arrogance, and he's addressing both Jerusalem and the nations. And he's talking about desolation. And ultimately, he's talking about that we should rejoice because Jerusalem will be rebuilt. So this code really seems to be what Zephaniah is saying. Let's go on to Mashiach, and then we'll talk about Hashem's names and also redemption. Part 1 of Mashiach is basic repetition. And this chart shows the most basic place where Mashiach occurs. And it's like a blueprint for Mashiach, because it's the smallest skip for Mashiach, HaMashiach, and it's joined by joy and rejoice. And these words are extremely related to Mashiach. If you look at Isaiah, I listed at the bottom here, and at Zephaniah, you will see these words used in a messianic context. So right away, this is interesting, but we don't assign it as statistic. We use it as permission to look for these words elsewhere. Rejoice is surrounded by Mashiach twice, with a skip of only 6. And that has a preliminary value of 1 in 1,000. In other words, you have to look through 1,000 other texts to find such a tight clustering of these words. And this R1 here, these are 3 ways of repeating the original idea. R1 is looking at all 3 words together. So with joy and Messiah as a straight line, it is immediately joined in an adjacent column with the word rejoice. So that is almost 1 in 5,000 probability. And here's the other combination of joy with Messiah, and it appears in a very tight area also again with a very small skip. Not quite as strong as the others, but also significant. So long phrases is the second part of Mashiach. There are 3 examples here that follow directly. If you look at joy and Messiah together in a column, you find an entire sentence. So it's a very relevant phrase. Likewise, if you look at the 2 words side by side, you find very interesting 5-letter extensions on each one about redemption and about Tishbi, which is the name for Elijah the prophet, Eliyahu Hanavi. Very unusual, very strong. And with revenge, with putting these words also next to each other with a very small skip again, revenge appears. So if you then take it to the next level with revenge and Messiah, you get the entire sentence we were discussing earlier. So these connections are as strong as the individual codes themselves. Okay. So this one actually happens to be way up there. This is a very conservative estimate. It's understated. Okay, Hashem's names have a similar level of significance. I did not show the significance of each one. They need to be measured individually later, but they're on the same level of high significance. And when you look at these three in yellow, these are the passages where Hashem is telling Moshe his names. And these are the three main names of Hashem, as told to Moshe. When you look at them, you come up with a whole series. But today, I just want to focus on this one, I am Hashem, because this one alone gives rise to a whole series. With skip 4 and with skip 16, the smallest skips for having these two words, I am Hashem, we find I will be overlapping and your God overlapping. It's almost like a response. We're looking impersonally at the words I am Hashem, and we're getting back a response, I will be your God. But even without reading anything into it, we can just now, we have permission to look for these words elsewhere. I will be your God. And first we find Hashem, your God, 4 times, which is not unusual because it appears this way in the plain text many times. But what's surprising is that there's 2 of them vertically. And the other surprise is that there's another one, your God, with skip of only 4, which is the best in the Torah. And the third surprise, I will be your God, also with skip 4. So the message is repeated in one of the few places to look for it. Another place to look for it is I am Hashem, which is what we started with. And it occurs, I believe this is the smallest area where you can have 5 of these in one area. And in order to put them into a most compact area, you need a skip of 23. And when you do that, you can find I will be your God again. And there's only 2 or 3 of these side-by-side occurrences in the entire Torah for I will be your God. So to have them here and in the previous, or also in the next, it's not expected. Here is a whole series of I will be, 3 of them vertically and 3 horizontally. This is the only other place where Hashem is telling Moshe his names. Hashem tells Moshe, I will be as I will be, right here. And 3 of them join, I will be there. And in the same chart, I will be occurs 4 times. And your God, right there. Again, there's only 2 or 3 of these in the whole Torah that are so close together. So why should it appear right here? Here is I will be your God in a perpendicular formation next to the same thing. 2 perpendicular formations. Here, all of the words are joined. I will be as I will be in green. Hashem, your God. It could be singular if you don't include the mem here, or it could be plural, your God. Of course, there's only one God, but your means singular or plural for your. Okay, so most of the codes I'll show today are about redemption, found by Ephraim Reutemann. And all of these subtopics dealing with redemption have been found by him in the last weeks and months. And his site is here. He has books that go into detail that I can't cover today, such as this one, the guarded wine, and the saving salvation of Hashem. So for the topic of belief, I think we saw this recently, but I just want to reemphasize that when you have Messiah and redemption and belief coming together with it, it's very strong because it's only a skip of 5. And this word belief, they will believe, having 6 letters in a skip of 3. If you look in the whole Tanakh, you're only going to find several dozen words that have a skip of 3 that are 6 letters. So we know it's up there with the strongest codes. In terms of rescue, study of Torah and mitzvot are very important. Ephraim found the best place for study of Torah, and right above it, captives returning. Let's see what he has to say.
And the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, the holy Orach Chaim HaKadosh, who was surely one of the major Kabbalists of all time, and he got all of his knowledge from the Arizal, from the Zohar, from all the early sources, which also say the same points very, very clearly. Study of Torah, he says openly, Talmud Torah literally redeems the captives, the holy sparks that were captured by the evil forces. The study of Torah actually redeems them and returns them to their source in Kedusha. It literally returns the holy sparks to their source of holiness. And when that happens, when the holy sparks get returned to their source in Kedusha, then the forces of evil lose that holy spark, and that causes the forces of evil disappear and to be eliminated.
So this is a family. Their daughter was captured on October 7th, and they were praying for her. They brought a Torah into their home in her honor. This Torah was about to be dedicated to a new shul in their neighborhood. They brought it into their home a week or 2 before she was rescued. And they also, the mother, I believe she recently took on some mitzvot. One of them is this separation of challah. And we'll see that in a moment. We'll see it in code first. Ephraim found the war, smallest skip in the Torah, skip of only 3. And words associated with war, all in one string. And what's interesting is that the same letters, if you take this mem lamed chet mem, it spells from bread. And if you continue that, you get this separation of challah, from bread. This is probably one of the strongest codes I've seen in years. So many letters and so relevant. And from dough, the dough, just measuring, and it's associated with Gan Eden because there are midrashim about Adam, the first man, who was considered like dough in the Garden of Eden, and women separate the dough to atone for the original sin in the Garden of Eden. But beyond all that, the code is hinting at the power of this mitzvah of separating dough, that you can change war into a mitzvah and it can have great salvation for all of us. So just for the word dough, the odds are 1 in 5,000. The whole thing is off the charts, I'm sure. as we study long phrases, we'll be able to have a better handle on the statistics on some of this. So this is actually her mother, who is separating Chala the week before she was rescued. As is known, the Torah has a protective value, and as well as circumcision and Pesach. First, there's just a code about the Torah. The smallest skip for protection, and overlapping it, the Torah and Hashem. Skip of only 9. Again from Ephraim. And circumcision and Pesach, these are the 2 mitzvahs that if you don't do them, you are subject to excommunication. They're very powerful protective mitzvahs. And Ephraim found, for the smallest skip of the Pesach, an amazing long phrase about circumcision, as well as mercy. And let's hear what he has to say about that.
How do we protect the Jewish people from the terrible danger and war that's going on? So one powerful method, the Targum Yomi ben Uziel, the ancient commentary, explains, at Pesach night, when the Mashchas, the destroying angel, was coming through Mitzrayim, Egypt, and destroying and killing. So the Targum Yomi ben Uziel said that Hashem gave us a special mitzvah, 2 mitzvahs which protected us from the destroying angel. One was the blood, the Dam Pesach, the blood of the Passover carbon Pesach, and the other was Dam Mila, the blood of circumcision, of the bris Mila. And these 2 bloods were put on a doorpost, and it says, the Targum Yomi ben Uziel says openly that Hashem passed over, and with his malach, with his destroying angel, and as soon as they saw the blood of the Passover offering and the blood of the bris Mila of circumcision, then the destroying angel passed over Pesach, that he saved the Jewish firstborn. And the exact word that Targum Yonasan but Ezekiel uses is that the malach, that Hashem really had rachamim, had mercy on us when he saw these 2 bloods of Passover and Milah. And because he had mercy on us, then he saved us. What's phenomenal is these exact words of Passover, the Passover, you look up with one of the minimum skips of HaPesach, it comes up a full long sentence, which really astonished me, an astonishing sentence. So Mo Moel Mila Brisi, that the Moel, the circumcised, the one who does the circumcision, will do a bris Mila, and Mila Brisi, my bris Mila. And that's literally crossing the words of the Psukim, and Yomus B'Mocham repeatedly, lest he die in battle, lest he die in battle, lest he die in battle. But the merit, there's a tremendous source of bris Milah, and of connecting to Hashem with bris Milah, keeping the kedusha, keeping the holiness of bris Milah your whole life. That tremendous schus will cause Hashem to have rachamim on us, mercy, and it will cause the destroying angel to Pesach, to pass over us, just like he passed over the Jewish people during the time of Passover, of Pesach.
So this idea of protection and also salvation are combined in yet another code that Ephraim found. First of all, just starting with the good and the evil, the simplest combination, skip of 10, best combination, best meaning for these words in the Torah. It actually continues, and not the evil. And land of life, which is a hint to the next world. So if we choose good and not evil, we have a much better next world, apparently. And this is reflected in this psalm, this verse from Psalms. The commentaries say that land of life means the next world. So what happens, there's also a praising Hashem here, and you can double space one of these codes and triple space the other one, and you come up in the same place. You can find both codes in the same exact place. So protection and salvation in one place. And this is a very conservative figure so far. Okay. Guarding, there's a very interesting set of guarded items for Passover: the wine, the matzah, and the night itself. The night is referred to a night of guarding. Hashem is guarding that night for our redemption, then and also in the future. So this is a quote from the Gemara: "No eye has seen it," referring to the next world. And it's like wine preserved in its grapes since the first days of creation. And this is the wine that Yitzhak blessed Yaakov with, according to Midrash. And it's connected to the final singing of Shir HaShirim at the final redemption, the song of Mashiach, sung at the Seder, sung on a cup of wine. And the Shekhinah, the divine presence, is connected to all of this. So one more time, let's hear what Ephraim has to say.
Ultimate song of redemption called Shir HaShirim, which is the song of Mashiach sung on the cup of wine of the Yain HaMashumer, the guarded wine of Gan Eden, like the Shlach Kodesh and many others explain. That unbelievable happiness represents the ultimate happiness of the world of Gilui Shechina, of the revelation of the Shechina, which that's why it's Pesach night. The blessings that Yaakov got from his father was Pesach night. Rashi says because it was guarded matzah shemura, the guarded night, Leil Shemurim, and the guarded wine, the 4 cups of wine, is the Yain HaMashumer, representing the ultimate happiness.
But all of this sprung from the same place. All of this sprung from one code from Rabbi Weissmandel in the 40s. He was looking for the word Torah, and this is the most widely published result from Rabbi Weissmandel. And Rabbi Ephraim Reutman found that this is extended by the word wine. And so just like the Mashiach codes all sprang from one initial code, and the Hashem codes all sprang from one initial code, many of these codes about redemption spring from Rabbi Weissmandel and then Rabbi Ephraim finding this word wine associated with, extended from the word Torah. So it all sprang from one place, and it's explained better in his book here. But the idea is that the wine is guarded, and that's what this new code is discussing. And the wine is repeated several times, and guarding is repeated twice, and for holiness. And there's a whole concept of the klipa, the peel surrounding the fruit, surrounding the kedusha, the holiness. And this is one of 2 codes. It's brought home in a second code we'll see in a moment, that the holiness needs protection. So a lot of the doubts or even the criticism of codes that have come out over the years that have no response, if people would look at the newest results that we're seeing today, they wouldn't be able to explain their earlier criticisms, but those criticisms are needed to protect the holiness of the codes of the Torah. It's no different than any other miracle that needs to be protected. Even the splitting of the sea, many people could explain it because there was a strong wind all night long prior to the splitting of the sea. So that was the protection of that miracle for people who did not want to see that miracle. So the idea of holiness is repeated here. And this other code guarded the wine instead of, it's a slightly different wording, but guarded the wine has, again, the holiness idea with Hashem. very long associated words, repeating the same idea, and very strong. The final redemption, again related to Pesach and wine and song. Drinking of wine, guarded. They guarded. Two very long expressions with the same themes. As we get more and more into long phrases, I'm sure we already know that this kind of long string for such a small skip is extremely strong. In the Torah itself, Hashem writes, "To me a temple." And that phrase Ephraim found in the codes with this smallest skip for that phrase, right next to Jerusalem. So that itself is very rare, very strong, but then you can actually take the same letters and single space them instead of double spacing them, and you have another occurrence of Yerushalayim. The repetition is always a signal that the first code was intentional. And this is another example of Tanakh verses being paraphrased in a code. So if you look at this phrase in detail, this pasuk, Zechariah, he's talking about Yerushalayim, he's talking about rebuilding, and the great zeal that Hashem has for Yerushalayim. So when we find, Ephraim Reutman found the word for zeal with skip of only 3 and echoed in the plain text, then we knew that this was a good anchor. And under the anchor, the buried treasure, he will rebuild Yerushalayim forever. So all of these codes have a similar construct. Many of them come from the Torah or from the Tanakh itself and are paraphrasing those ideas. And those are the strongest kinds of codes that we can measure. And this one is paraphrasing something we say every morning. My God, the soul you placed in me is pure, and we're thanking Hashem for the promise of revival of the dead. And this is extremely strong as well. It's probably understated because of this long column. So just to round out some of the klippa, because if you want to get to the fruit, if you want to get to the holiness, you have to look at the klippa and you have to remove the klippa. So you have to become familiar with it. People might question the spelling or the wording or the accuracy of the text. So as far as the spelling and the wording go, you can use some of these long phrases. We saw this one earlier today. And sometimes if you ask 2 different Hebrew speakers, you'll get 2 different opinions on the proper grammar. Yeah, so if you're using words from Tanakh, then also some modern Hebrew speakers won't understand or won't agree that they should belong there. But the codes themselves give support, because Ephraim found, for example, the same words, Mashiach will be exalted on high, in a different place. And the spelling in the Torah is sometimes with a vav and without, and also in the codes, the same phenomenon occurs. So for any skip at all, this would be already 1 in 3,000, but the fact that it has the same skip of 8 makes it even more significant, which adds that much more strength to the original phrase. that much more confidence if you had any doubts about spelling or about grammar. And a similar thing happens with, we'll see in a moment, with another phrase. But just to add support, this is the best place for the Messiah, son of David, a very common expression for Messiah. And it has also third temple is next to it, not shown in this chart, but it's next to it, and it has the idea of I will be exalted on high, speaking from Ben David, son of David. So it's again reinforcing the original sentence, and is again very strong. And again, we measure this by comparing these words in other texts. We require only, I measured only these two words, I will be exalted on high, and I saw how many times they occurred near a random fixed point in other texts. I don't require the other text to have the son of David, the Messiah, son of David, because that would be unfair to the measurement. I'm just simply seeing how often these two words occur in a fixed area in other texts. So again, revenge belongs to Messiah, it's associated with bin Laden. If you double space it, we find the Messiah takes revenge in the current present tense and also sin and crime. Sin and crime. Now, we might wonder about the spelling of bin Laden in this one, and we might wonder about the phrasing. But again, here's the alternate spelling, which is more common. And sin and crime is attached. This might be the strongest code we have that we can measure easily at this moment. 1 in 20 million, just for those two words to be attached. And it goes on to discuss wailing, shocked silence and wailing. And that's connected to another place where we have twin towers, and we ask the question, who wailed? And the response is the US wailed. And having the US here just for the US is already very strong. So all these reinforcements just show that the original phrase was a legitimate phrase, as well as all these other strong codes being very interesting. Now, the last point is about accuracy of the text. And here we can just think about a logical exercise. If you had an infinite amount of knowledge at your disposal, it would be easy for you to do both of these tasks. But let's think about which is more difficult just for a moment for a human being. To predict the identities of everyone associated, all of the ancestors of bin Laden, or to predict which letters might change in a text over time. We have the same timeline to bin Laden as we have to the recent Torah texts. It's much easier to predict which letters are going to change in a text than it is to predict every ancestor of bin Laden, let alone what bin Laden did in his life. So the idea is that Hashem is smart enough, obviously, to know what the text is going to look like today. So now we have a decision. If we're trying to plant codes in the Torah, are we going to plant them so that they match the computerized version that is in use everywhere around the world during the generation that is searching these codes, or should we plant them in the original text? And by the way, there's no guarantee that anything has actually changed. The text is extremely accurate over the centuries. There's a few letters in question only. So the question really is, why are these codes so significant if the text has changed and the codes supposedly disappeared? So another example, this is an example of a change in the text when the Greek translation was produced. 72 sages made the same change. They didn't want to have an awkward sentence in the beginning that in the Greek language, it would look like some force called in the beginning created God. They wanted to say God created in the beginning. So they changed the order of the words. So in the Hebrew codes, I'm not talking about the Septuagint anymore, but the Hebrew codes themselves have this switch, this idea that God created in the code instead of the other direction. And that's already 1 in 2,000. So if Hashem was smart enough to understand, to predict the whole Septuagint, then obviously he's smart enough to know which letters may or may have changed and whether maybe none of the letters changed. One last point, actually, about hidden failures. There are actually hidden successes. If you look at everything we were looking at for Mashiach, there's a lot of possible ways of branching out from the original find. And we actually saw very strong results from the first 3 that we tried. Now, what typically happens is there are other ways that we could have tried. And so the critical mind, including our own, will ask, what would have happened if we had tried these other ways? And the thinking is usually, well, if you try too many of these possibilities, you're going to dilute your result. But instead of diluting it, we find that we have hidden successes and we actually have a stronger result when we pursue these other ways. This was rejoice. This was all 3 words together. This was joy. But there are other ways of finding, branching out from here. And we actually saw a few of them already today that were very strong. So please send me questions in the chat or by email later on at any time. Anyone who has information about Tzfania and how his prophecy relates to today's world or any other interesting connections, I'll be interested to hear. And I think for the moment, we're all set. There's a lot of research left to do, a lot of follow-up for long phrases and for all of the things that we covered today. So I'll be busy with that, B'ezrat Hashem, and in a few months, hopefully, we'll have some more to discuss. Thank you, Aryeh, very much for the opportunity.
We want to thank, on behalf of our live studio audience and our viewers, when this will be up in the Rumble channel and shared on social media outlets. We want to thank Professor Rips and Art Levitt for another illuminating talk in our Root and Branch Bible Codes Fellowship seminar series. It's now bi-monthly. So we wish the best for everyone. Sending you best wishes from Jerusalem, that will have a happy Purim and Passover filled with many miracles for Am Yisrael and for the whole world. Thank you very much.